Welcome to the final video, probably, for my E24 suspension. If you haven't seen the other videos, this should help get you up to speed. I took a lot of things apart, pressed out some bearings, pressed out even more bearings, did some grinding and cutting, and then started putting everything back together again.
Okay, so the next step is putting the shocks and springs on. These are my newly painted struts, and I'm pretty excited that they turned out better than I expected. Pretty excited about that. So anyway, I'm clearly feeling much better than I did a few days ago when I was painting these, so I'm pretty grateful for that. Plus now I actually have a voice for the internet again. But anyway, first step is this little plastic collar that's going to hold the boot in place. So you just slide that down a bit. My new Bilstein shock goes in, and this has a collar nut at the top. And the OEM shocks, you have to put some oil in here, and with the Bilsteins you don't have to do that. So you just slide these in here and start spinning the nut. Okay. She's on, piston is unscratched, knuckles unbroken. Rubber spring boot at the bottom. And now the spring. Actually, hold on, not the spring. Next is the boot. Now, I went with H&R springs, which I do have to say, the new painted black shock body, the bright blue dust boot, and the beautiful matte navy blue spring. Very satisfying. All right, so the spring doesn't need to compress too much. Top of the piston is right here, so I need to get the spring down to about here, so only about an inch or so. I'm just going to put a shop towel between my metal compressors and the spring because I don't want to scratch up these very pretty springs. All right, please enjoy while I fast forward through this bit. Next thing that goes on, all right, and now the top hat can go on, so put the little metal dust boot, washer. Actually, I can put the dust boot on this way. And now this can slide on. So the top nut on the Bilstein's a 19, and then in the center of the piston there's a 6mm Allen. And my brother bought me these as a gift many years ago, and they've come in so handy. They're open end socket and ratchet. So I need to put a 6mm in the center and then tighten the nut with a 19. Can't do that with a standard socket, but with these, you can just stick this down through the center, and then I have the little Allen sticking out. How neat is that? And then once this is tight, then I can torque it down. But for now, I can just use these to get them tight. Okay, so this is one of the easiest things I'm gonna do on this car, and that is putting in the new front hub assembly. So this is all in one, has the wheel bearing, the hub, and if your car has this, the ABS sensor. So, all right, so it just slides right on. Yep, already made contact. And can't tighten the actual nut here itself until the car is back on the ground. And because I know myself, I've mementoed it for me so I can't fuck it up. And I'll put the dust caps in later, but then I also now know that I need to torque these because who knows when I'm actually going to get this car back on the ground, and I don't want to forget to torque something.
And now I'm reassembling the rear shock and spring, and I made the mistake of posting a video like this to Instagram where the entire internet told me that the spring was going to explode in my face and I was going to die, and I decided to take safety much more seriously going forward.
Okay, so now it is time to work on the front suspension of the car. Going to replace the front control arm, the front thrust arm, and the outer tie rod here. First things first, you should probably put on some gloves so that way your hands don't get all dirty. That'd be a good idea. Okay. Get out the cotter pins from all of the nuts on the control arm, thrust arm, and the tie rod. So gonna take the lower control arm off. These are 22s on here. Nope, are these 19s? No, these are 19s, son of a bitch. Gonna leave that in there so the ball joint's solid. I'm a mechanic.
Oh, that's so cute.
Fuck you, man. You've only got like 110 pounds of ass behind you. You gotta improvise. So if you don't have one of these ball joint separators, I highly recommend getting this over the fork one. Fork one sucks. So I can't tighten the inner part until the car is back on the ground. But the ball joint side you have to tighten here. So I'm just gonna get the top part snug and then worry about the other side here in a bit. Okay. Really hate doing ball joints. Oh yeah, she was worn. And that's compared to the new one. Okay. So now, oh, that was easy. I didn't jump for that one. So if you want to be best friends with your alignment person, put new tie rods on your car. It will pay dividends and people won't refuse to work on your old BMW or whatever shitty car you may like. So here's my old tie rod. Here's my new tie rod. What I need to do is make the overall length of these two the same. Out of the box, this one is fully threaded in, so obviously it's going to be shorter than this one. So what I'm going to do is measure the overall length, and by that I mean the center of the top to the center of the bottom, because that's the approximate location of the bolt. So I don't want to measure the actual top to bottom location here because the diameter of this could be different from this one because this is OEM and this is not. So I am all set. Length matches this one. Okay. So now put these back on the car. So now the heads are twisted correctly. I'm gonna torque down each end of the tie rod. I think it's 40 Newton meters, something like that. Okay, tie rod is tightened, and now going to tighten the lock nuts there. Those are tightened now. Need to tighten these two, and those are 85 Newton meters each. Okay, all torqued up. The casing on the ABS wires is just disintegrating. So I'm gonna peel that off and replace it with some plastic corrugated tubing that I have. It's not perfect, but it'll get the job done. And you just slide it into place from one end. Figured if this is good enough to handle the heat in the engine bay of my M3, it's good enough for the wheel well of a 1980s BMW. So that is all done up and much prettier. So this is the part where I say reinstallation of the shock and spring strut assembly. Quick and easy job, but as I just found out, these stupid cheap shock tops that I bought, the bolts are just ever so slightly too wide to fit into this housing up here. So I need to use a step bit and just drill it out, God, just like ½ a mil on each hole. So I'm gonna do that really quick. I'm a little annoyed that I have to do this, but not the end of the world. So these 3 holes here line up with the 3 holes on the bottom of the strut housing. And then there's 2 little tabs poking up that line up with grooves in the bottom of that. So that makes it simple. So I'm gonna get these lined up first and then jack it up into place so I can put in the top of the shock. So the bolts down here aren't lining up with the holes, so I need to slide this toward me a bit. Why aren't you lining up? I have a feeling it's not lining up because it's not straight enough. What is that? Touching my finger. Why is this side being so difficult? And where the hell did I set that bolt? Oh my God, do I have to play back the video to find out what I did with the bolt? Good Lord. So I found the bolt. It was under the jack. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Have all 3 threaded in. Awesome. Torque spec here is 22 Newton meters. The ABS sensor on this was very difficult to get out because it just had a bunch of rust on it and was very resistant to the idea of coming out. So I'm gonna clean it up before reinstalling it.
Now with the front done, it was time to get started reassembling the rear, but first I needed to clean it up a bit, because even though nobody's ever going to see these parts, it would bother the crap out of me if I put it back together looking like this. So I just took a wire wheel attachment to everything and just really cleaned everything up as well as I possibly could. And you can see here just how bad some of the rust was around the hub. And I had to get all of the rust, or as much of the rust as I could, off of those little ABS sensor ribs. And here they are looking much better. They're not like new, but they're good enough. And that's all that counts. I kept the cleaning train in motion for the mating surface where the rear wheel bearing goes into place on the rear trailing arm, and they looked much better.
So they're not perfect, but they're better than they were. And at least it's a smooth surface now. I can't feel any of the roughness that I did when that was just all rusty. So I'm calling that good enough.
And putting a little bit of grease on the surface so that way when we press the bearing in, it's not, hopefully not going to rust.
Dumbass.
I'm like, what happened?
Mounting in a new C-clip, and with that, the wheel bearings are officially done. Once again, adding a little bit of grease to the mating surface, and now pressing the spindles into the bearings on the rear trailing arms.
Should we... I need to line these teeth up before I press it in. And you'll feel it grab a little bit, and you can press it on like a millimeter by hand, and then you have to put on a plate. Very smooth and easy. And you'll feel it bottom out as soon as it gets down there. So there you go, that's it. So now I'm just spinning the collar nuts back on. Can't tighten these yet until the car is back on the ground. So there's also a lock ring that goes around the outside of this.
And like all good BMW projects, you have to remove grime from inside of every Allen bolt before you can actually remove the bolt.
God damn, this thing's heavy.
That's it.
Yay, thank you. This slide hammer and I got off to a rocky start, but I feel like we've,
Oh, you found your stride?
yeah.
After smacking yourself in the chest?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I had to strap this thing down to the stand in hopes that that'll help keep it planted. Not really. since the seal puller wasn't doing the trick, I'm breaking out the big guns. It's out. Right here, and then so really I could hammer this in, but I already have the press set up. I might as well use this. Okay, now this one fits. We are resting nicely on the lip in here. Cool, this side is done. Now I need to reinstall this into the diff itself, but I need to replace this O-ring because I'm pretty sure this diff has never had anything replaced in 35 years. So I just need to pop off this O-ring and put a new one on. Just to get it looped up. And then slide this back over and into its groove, and I'm done. Still has a little bit of old Loctite here in the threads. I'm just gonna pop off. If you do find yourself in the same position as I am and you have to take these off of your differential, be sure that you mark or remember which side goes where, because this side is about 1/2 mil thicker than the shim on the other side.
I didn't get this on video, but there are metal retaining rings on the inside of the diff that hold the output flange into place. So I did replace those before hammering the output flange back in and then just testing to make sure that I had smooth rotation of the diff.
So it is time to finally start reassembling the rear end. Subframe's just kind of loose and flopping here. I just have it propped up on some 4x4s. But first thing I'm going to do is connect it back to the top of the diff and then put in the rear trailing arms, but loosely, so that way I can still move them around and make room to put in the CV axles. So with that said, let's get started.
Almost immediately, I had a problem. I didn't have enough clearance on the rear subframe for the rear trailing arm, so I had to trim that down. And then I also had to trim down the actual plates that hold the camber and toe adjusters into place, because they were binding up and they needed to be just shaved ever so slightly just so they could move a little bit freer inside of the bracket. And then also the bolt that holds a dog bone in place was about 10 mil too long and was making contact with the bracket, so I had to shave that down as well.
Okay. Full range of motion here. Full range of motion there. This is exciting. So in case you're watching and wondering why I need to add camber and toe adjustment, or wondering what that actually does, I want to give a brief demonstration of what it is and why I want it. So camber adjustment takes your tire and either pushes it in or pushes it out. So the inside of the rear trailing arm, adding this adjustment here, now I can have some positive camber, or I can add negative camber. And then toe adjustment will adjust your tire in this direction. So that's this outside adjuster here. And the reason I want that, toe adjustment is gonna help the tracking of the car. And camber adjustment, since I am lowering the car in the rear, I could end up with excess negative camber, which is going to affect my tire wear and make my tires wear out faster. So these will allow my alignment person to add a little bit of positive camber back, so that way I'm not wearing my tires out prematurely. Or if I want to adjust it in the future, if I change the height of the car, or if I decide to take this on track or something, I want to be able to adjust that. So, you know, where on the street, maybe I would have 1 to 1.5 degrees of negative camber. And if I'm on the track, maybe I'm going to want to dial that up a bit to 2 to 2.5 degrees.
Now for this part, I was a big dumb, and I installed the CV axles without actually tightening down the axle nut. And I didn't get video of me taking them back off, but it looked and sounded a little like this. Anyway, I can put back in the dog bone now, and you can see why I had to trim the bolt.
So putting a little bit of Loctite and just following the dirt outline. Dude, I gotta admit, non-OEM parts are made for shit.
Is that non-OEM?
Yeah, everything's non-OEM because OEM stuff's like 4 times the price.
What is it, OE?
Yeah, it's that, but like the bolts just like don't line up quite right. It's infuriating. Just makes things take much longer than they should.
So what was wrong with the hair?
I couldn't rest my head on the ground. Like now I can rest it. Fashion.
The important side of mechanicking.
Hairdos. What'd you do with those nuts? Those big old nuts I gave you?
Yeah, right here. Okay, I think we're good up here. I need to get this.
And now I'm torquing down these subframe bolts outside of the car. Lastly, it's time to install the rear spring and shock once again. And this is the last part before I can put the car back on the ground.
I'm just snugging it for now, and I'll give it the final torque once the car's back on the ground. Nope. Don't need you. I don't need no man.
Can you get me a device?
And with the installation of the top hat nuts, this is done. And with the car back on the ground, I could bask in the glory of a job well done and a car finally moving out of the garage. Not under its own power, but moving nonetheless. And this project is so done, I only have a few things left to do, like the front and rear brakes, some brackets, a complete exhaust system, wheels, tires, re-engineering the rear brake shield, reattaching the e-brake, installing the axles, and torquing down all of the suspension bolts. But hey, being close counts, right? Right?
If you like what I'm doing here and would like to see more, please subscribe to my channel. If you're embarrassed about liking it, you can hide your subscriptions from your friends in your privacy settings. Either way, the more the merrier. I'd be happy to have you. And subscribing really helps out my channel so I can put out more of these videos.